After 12 years, I've still seemingly experienced so little of what Guild Wars 2 has to offer as far as classes. Engineer is one of those classes, as I've bounced off of it several times. I never seemed to enjoy it that much. Having spent the lion's share of my 2,600 hours in the game on my Char Warrior, I'm setting out to complete my third month playing nothing but another class. I really hope I don't regret this. It's time to break out the wrenches and hit the Crystal Desert. For this month's goal, rather than seeking out map completion, I thought it would be fun to dive back into Path of Fire, one of the most popular expansions, and try to knock out as many achievements as I could. I decided to stick with the same challenge of not looking up any build guides or videos on it, and to just work with my own gut instincts and reading comprehension, which probably isn't the best, but hey, why not? I was super excited to get gearing this month because I had a bunch of Ascended armor and weapon chests to work with, and went ahead and grabbed 4 whole pieces of wonderful Ascended Celestial gear. Yes! But I'm so used to playing heavy armor classes that I chose heavy armor, so this month started off rough for me. I wish I at least grabbed light armor, which could be useful in future challenges, but I've already done the other 2 heavy armor classes, so. Luckily this month was not lost, as a helpful commenter pointed out that World vs. World had stat selectable gear that I totally forgot about. So I was able to still gear up much easier and cheaper than previously. See? Who says we're not learning things in this series? I rounded it out by biting the bullet and buying Ascended Celestial accessories to fill out the non-legendary slots I have left over there, since I can just roll those to every other character for this challenge. The spec choice to kick things off was obvious enough. Since I'd be playing in Path of Fire, it only felt right to play Hollowsmith first, since that was its home turf. I wanted to try out a bit of condition-focused play first, since I went heavy into power with Revenant last month. I kitted up a nice sword pistol combo complete with the obligatory lightsaber, got my Fashion Wars going for the armor, and got to work. I figured it made sense to work in order of the zones, so it was off to Crystal Oasis, home of the legendary Choya Pinata first. With my Celestial Condi Hollowsmith build set up, I photon forged my way across the sands. Unfortunately, despite how easy and straightforward it seemed, Hollowsmith was a bit of a challenge for me. You see, the core mechanic is heat management. Whenever you activate your Photon Forge, you begin generating heat passively, as well as based on what you're doing. Every skill generates some heat, some things vent heat, and some skills are more effective when they're used above 50% heat, incentivizing you to play a dangerous game of chicken. And I'll go on record that I love chicken. It's one of my favorite proteins. Eventually, you either have to deactivate your Photon Forge or get lit on fire, causing yourself a bunch of damage and disabling your kit for longer than if you just switched it off. I'll give you one guess what my problem was. Yeah, I lit myself on fire more than a stay lit prank birthday candle. I had an absolute blast with Hollowsmith from the first very few fights I did, but I don't think my Char did. She came out a bit charred. But who can blame me? Chaining my F3 Prismatic Singularity to pull enemies into my Hardlight Arena and Laserdisc turned every fight into a Daft Punk concert, while I generated enough heat to melt the polar ice caps, and finished it off by lighting myself on fire while executing the largest laser discharge on the face of the earth since 16 some years ago, when all of us were screaming, "I'm a fire in my laser!" With several more hours of gameplay over the first week, I did finally manage to get to the point where I wasn't lighting myself on fire every other engagement anymore. But I'm not perfect at it, and it still happened from time to time when things got real sticky. By the end of the time I had for it, the most difficult thing about Hollowsmith, though, was pulling myself away from it. The build I settled on was Inventions, Firearms, and Hollowsmith in a 3-3-2, 3-2-3, and 3-2-1 format. I rocked with sword pistol for the vast majority of my gameplay, but occasionally messed around with rifle as well. My favorite skills I settled on were Laserdisc, Hardlight Arena, and the Elite Prime Light Beam, as I mentioned earlier, and I rounded it out with Coolant Blast and Flamethrower Turret for a little extra point defense and condition damage for open world PvP. It was genuinely the most fun I've had so far during this challenge on one elite spec build, and probably the most fun in general I've had with a new spec in all of 2024. So far, so good. No regrets to be had here, but the show must go on, and up next was Scrapper. Now, I've had a thing for hammers ever since this game first came out, and while I've tended to stay away from them as they're not typically very ideal, there's something very basic in the appeal to me of slapping someone around with a massive rock or slab of metal on top of a stick. Not to mention, Scrapper always seemed like a very strong spec, although I knew barely anything about it. I started poking around at the spec trees and the Scrapper skills, and I was immediately deflated a little bit. While I could certainly see the strength of the elite spec, even just assessing the tooltips, it didn't feel very inspired when compared to Hollowsmith, honestly. I may have messed up and accidentally saved the best for first, but I was determined to get hyped because I could tell this was going to be a strong build and I finally wanted to try it. So I did what any sane, logical Guild Wars 2 players does when they want to get excited. I built an entire legendary weapon just for this one elite spec. Okay, this is a legendary I've been wanting since 2012. Sleek, stylish, and a handle full of Quicksilver, I finally forged myself Juggernaut. Happy with my new drip and realizing I now need to find hammer builds for all of my classes because I love this thing, I set out with a renewed vigor. I didn't have much left to do in Crystal Oasis, so I had already wrapped up most of what I was interested in doing there, as well as the Desert Highlands to the north. While in the Desert Highlands, I did realize that I was still partway through my long since abandoned Griffin mount. Yes, you heard me correctly. So, I made it my immediate task before doing anything else at this point to complete the Griffin, so that all the experience I would earn the rest of this month would actually fill out my masteries experience bars and I could finally finish my masteries. I was expecting a lower damage output than the Hollowsmith, but honestly, with the constant might and vulnerability the build dishes out, it was actually pretty smooth to solo stuff even. Toss in all the reflex, barriers, stabilities, and lightning combo fields, and this build felt really fantastic. Good damage and very, very good survivability. I was able to effortlessly rip apart all the elites and champions in the Griffin mount instances and start diving around the desert. Unfortunately, even with Juggernaut and a brand new Griffin adding extra dopamine on top of Scrapper, it just couldn't pull out ahead of Hollowsmith for me. The gameplay was very much reminiscent of Banner Warrior, as I just walked in, dropped some gyros to do some damage and barrier, and then just used weapon skills mostly off cooldown and repeat forever. The biggest sin that Scrapper commits for me is that the Stealth Gyro Elite ability is just massively disappointing for solo PvE. I just ended up running Elixir X the whole time and barely used that. Because for some reason, I always ended up to get the Warrior Rampage mode and never Tornado, and that was really annoying. I play Warrior, I've used Rampage enough, give me the Tornado. Now don't get it twisted. I certainly see a high skill ceiling here for support in group PvE or PvP modes, with tactical uses of things like Electro Whirl and Defense Field, but that's not what I'm here for. I'm a primarily solo PvE guy, and this just wasn't passing the vibe check for that. Though, still not as rough as Herald was for me last month. I finally ended my time as a Scrapper with Alchemy, Inventions, and Scrapper in a 1-2-1, 3-1-2, and 3-3-3 format, using every gyro skill except the aforementioned Elixir X instead of the Sneak Gyro. While Scrapper may not have been my speed for solo PvE, I'm definitely bookmarking this in my memory to come back to when I'm looking to tackle some group content, because I think this is a support build I could really enjoy playing compared to some others. You know, I tried Firebrand a bit and I couldn't really get into it, so this may be a strong contender for me. Heck, I can even see myself playing this just when I'm feeling tired and lazy and want some low brain power gameplay because it's that reliable and survivable. The month was starting to get away from me a bit, so I had to make a decision between playing Core Engineer or Mechanist. Core Engineer I had already played a decent bit during my now ancient Iron Man Engineer livestream gameplay, so I rounded out the month with Mechanist. Now I went in with my hopes very high for Mechanist. I expected this to be my favorite elite spec prior to starting the month because I recall Mechanists using me to mop the floor in SPVP back in End of Dragons. Now that I had so much fun with Hollowsmith though, it's got some big, fiery shoes to fill. I've seen people go on endlessly about how crazy, stupid, busted this is, pulling reliable DPS while the engineer does nothing but pick at their belly button lint and let the Jade Mech Gurren Lagann eliminate everything with or without a pulse in the current city block. So there I am, excited, diving into the spec tree and looking at the skills, and it's all signets. Every shiny, new, unique skill is just a signet. But then I realized, compared to Warrior Signets or Revenant's Herald stuff, few of these have some really fun activations, so I had to think of it more like a skill that also has a passive effect, which was interesting. Things got even better when I realized that my Elite Overclock Signet allowed my Jade Mech, Mr. Game & Watch, to channel early YouTube and also scream at his enemies. It also took me an embarrassingly long amount of time to figure out how to name him, but he was always Mr. Game & Watch in my heart. I spun out my rifle and hit the cracked landscape of the Desolation and eventually the domain of Vabby, with the confidence of my last 2 successes putting a spring in my step. The end of the month was looming though, and I had a lot of achievements to get through still. And then, on top of that, my Mechanist build sucked. Worst yet is I really couldn't figure out for the longest time what was wrong. I was using my best abilities, I thought. I tried different supporting turrets, but no matter what I did, my damage output sucked. It was taking me a millennium to take down enemies unless I hit them with absolutely everything. And I'm not talking elites or anything either, just your regular run-of-the-mill trash mobs and veterans. And that lack of DPS piled up and made me feel squishy. My first few hours on Mechanist were actually horrible. For the first time in the last 2 months, I actually contemplated looking up a guide to figure out what I screwed up, because even though the balance changes have happened since the biggest heyday of Mechanist from my understanding, it still shouldn't be this bad. But I resolved myself, I double tapped through, and went back to figuring it out. After rereading all of the different mech skills, signets, and traits over and over again, I identified my problem and I felt like an idiot. I was using Superconducting Signet to synergize with Discharge Array and Sky Circuits to eliminate close range targets. But I made the mistake of choosing Jade Cannons in the skill tree, so my mech was sitting back shooting at things. And I thought it would run in when I used my F2 Discharge Array, but I was sorely mistaken and I was not paying enough attention to what the positioning looked like in combat. So I swapped over to Rolling Smash instead, so Mr. Game & Watch would blitz headlong into combat and become a beacon of pain for me. Finally, it started clicking. Just that simple swap had me clearing out enemies much easier than before. I was popping shots with a rifle while Game & Watch blitzed Joko's minions, praise Joko, and my turrets gunned down hordes of enemies in dynamic events. It was a good time. Swapping over to Mech Melee made a massive difference in the performance of this build for me. As the end of the month closed in, I completed most of the more straightforward achievements in the Desolation, moving on to the Domain of Vabby to clear out as many as I could. Sadly, I would end the month with quite a few achievements left in the tank here, though still completing many achievements, including the Griffin. So I can't say I'm at all disappointed in the progress I made this month. Mechanist, however, felt very middling to me. By the time the month was up, effective, to be sure, but didn't inspire much once I was used to everything. Perhaps it was me, maybe I should have strayed away from turrets and gone with more signets, though the other signets left didn't seem that they would have created much of a different dynamic. Force Signet may have increased my damage output, but a simple knockback on activations means it likely would have been a button unpressed. And Barrier Signet was the same way, decreasing incoming damage and maybe occasionally used for a Master Chief bubble shield. Shift Signet didn't seem to be useful for solo PvE, as it's just a movement boost in Shadow Step. Perhaps Mechanist would fare better with a grenade kit or bomb kit, and that's why it felt mid to me. It certainly doesn't require your main weapon like Hollowsmith did, and I had 2 turrets anyway, so I could have either taken 2 kits to swap between, or taken another Signet, and just gone with 1 strong kit. Hindsight is 2020 though, unlike me without my glasses. I definitely had the most fun during this month compared to the other 2 so far, so I really regret that I didn't give this a try sooner. I also have some regrets about the Griffin mount that I finally got during this month after 7 years. Click this video right here to hear what those regrets are.